Hello and welcome. My name is Barkha. You're with the Mojo Story. For those who can afford it, there is no wedding in India apparently complete without a Sabyasachi. So why has one of India's top designers got himself into the eye of a storm? One that involves, according to critics, the lives and dignity of India's traditional craftspeople. Let's bring up our big story on the program today. We're looking at why a collaboration between Sabyasachi and H&M has created a storm in the world of fashion. This was in fact meant to be a top-line way of putting Indian design on the global map. At least that's what Sabyasachi is arguing. But critics are saying that the H&M collaboration is a betrayal of craftspersons, their lives, their livelihood, their dignity, and in fact, Indian tradition at large. They're accusing Sabyasachi of being tone deaf to this dignity. But Sabyasachi has responded to his critics saying that he had only one aim, and that was to in fact put India on the global map, to talk about designed in India just as we talk about made in India. So who's right and who's wrong? As Indian Express asked today, from Sanganer to Sabyasachi, what exactly is responsible fashion beyond the rhetoric? Everybody today claims to be practicing responsible, sustainable fashion. Everybody today claims to be talking about the rights of artisans and craftspeople. But what is the fault line in this fashion conversation really about? Let's bring up four people today on our program who I think, while they may be on different sides of the conversation, are really the best equipped to talk about this. First up on the program, we're joined by Meera Goradia. Meera Goradia is a co-founder of Creative Dignity, has been one of those who has called out Sabyasachi for not respecting craftspeople in the way that this opportunity could have been used for. We're also joined by one of our top designers, Gaurav Jaya Gupta. Gaurav, thank you. I think we all know and love your work, so thank you for being with us. Jaya, Jaitly, the original matriarch, as it were, of the movement for craftspeople, the founder of Dastkar, the patron of Dastkari, Haat Samiti. Thank you, Jaya ji. Pleasure to have you with us. And Namrata Zakaria, not just a columnist, but also the founder of Baradari, with Kareena Kapoor Khan, has been raising funds through the pandemic, actually for the dignity and livelihood of many of our artisans, a cause, in fact, I have supported. So really interesting to have four of you on. And I want to start with you, Jaya Jaitly, if I can, because we read your piece in the Indian Express. We've seen some of the arguments you've made. But I think for people who are not following the intricacies of this debate, what is disturbing you about this collaboration? What do you think it has failed to do that it could have?
Two things mainly, which I hope I did bring out in my article. One was when he speaks about honoring the Indian craftsperson and he mentioned certain craft forms, and then he said he made a hybrid and digitized it. That was the red flag and the alarm that sounded, because you can't use the name of the Indian craftsperson if you don't directly use his work. What you have done is copy that image of Sanganer from somewhere, the chintz from somewhere, and then he says ancient cultures, travels around the world. So what it was a hodgepodge. Then to say it's Indian tradition and made in India, if he had not mentioned the craftsperson at all, as such, one cannot have any grouse against digitization. But if you digitize a craftsperson's work, then you have to either involve the craftsperson, say, make me this beautiful piece of cloth or artwork, let me pay you a royalty for it, let us have an agreement that only I can use it. And after that, we will put your name as a co-collaborator and then digitize it all you want. But the way he's just flippantly used the craftsperson's name and the craft style's name, technique, and then not involve the craftsperson at all. And as I mentioned in my article, the state of Sanganer is terrible. I've been there just a couple of years ago, and ever since then, all one has heard from them is demands for ration, and that there are most of them are migrant workers. They have gone. There are 1,000 people with no food. All these things, and they're shining examples of the best craftsmanship begging for ration. And I would have thought that somebody like Sabyasachi would have known about Sanganer and had a heart and soul in it and really brought it out, or any other art form. But to say digital and use their name and not help them at all was really sad.
But can I ask you, and please do forgive me, I'm no fashionista. I barely manage to, I think it's a good day when my clothes are ironed and clean and not soaked in mud, given the kind of work that I do. But as someone who does love handcrafted fabric, loves our weaves, loves my kurtas, my question is this, Jaya Jaitly. Isn't this ethical dilemma one that applies to any big brand in India? How much creative copyright goes to the artisan at the bottom of the hierarchy? How much sort of share of profit goes to her or him? Why is this debate only about Sabyasachi? What has Sabyasachi done that's different from any big successful fashion entrepreneur?
Most fashion entrepreneurs that I've seen have actually used direct work. There's Ritu Kumar or there's Tarun Tahilyani. They don't digitize. All of them, even Madhu Jain, she used real ikat. All of them have brought with their names the real work onto stage. But on the other hand, take Manish Arora. All digital, all crazy, all kooky and all wonderful, but he doesn't talk about Indian craft. So he is fair in his kingdom, and the ones who walk the ramp with the real ikat and the real bamboo and the real, take raw mango, big brand. Indians wear saris of raw mango for weddings in Hawaii, as far as I know. So that is not, he brings the real weaver there, and the real weaver is uplifted. And it's a big brand. I don't know if H&M is such a fantastic brand that you have to compromise the interests of the artisan.
Okay, let me bring in a counter view at this point, and let me bring you, Namrata. You have been actually defending Sabyasachi, and you've been arguing that the better business there is for a designer, the more there is a trickle down sort of benefit to the artisan at the bottom. But when I'm hearing Jerry, there does seem to be an issue of creative copyright, as it were, of not giving the credit to the worker. How do you counter that, Namrata?
For one, Barkha, I haven't defended Sabyasachi per se. I have criticized the idea of a group of NGOs collectively getting together and calling him out the way they have. I have said it is no short of ganging up and bullying. And as politely as I can say that, I will stand by it. I'm going to tell you a couple of places where I do have, I would like to correct Ms. Jaya Jaitly. One is digitization is not only Sabyasachi's forte. It's probably one of the very few times he's done it. It is extremely essential to any art or craft form in India. Digitization takes prints to wallpapers. It takes prints to good earth plates and assorted china and all of that. Sanganer is a very, very beautiful art cooperative. They are amongst the richest and the most successful in the country. Last year, we were speaking to the chipas of Sanganer. Most of the block printers there are called chipas. That's their trade name and their surname. And we discovered that, of course, when times are good, not during the pandemic, when times are good, they make as much as 2 crores a year. And this is what their website states. So they are, I would say, as successful, maybe even more successful than the Banarsi in India, because block printing is a phenomenon. We not only wear it on our clothes, we wear it on several of our clothes. We have it on bed linen, on table linen, on everything. Block printing is a rage worldwide, and it's not going to go anywhere. And we cannot take away the fact that Anokhi, the brand, has really done fantastic work in reviving block printing and making it as trendy as it is today. Of course, so has Ritu Kumar and an assortment of designers. Tarun Tahilyani was the first to use digital prints. I still have t-shirts from him that I don't fit into, unfortunately, with Mughal prints block printed upon them. Secondly, the issue of copyright doesn't really apply to an archival print. copyright and intellectual property is such a gray area in India. I think Sabyasachi is the only one who's managed to copyright some of his motifs and work with superfluous funding of IP lawyers. But other than that, copyright is an issue that exists in a legal level, but mostly in a policy level.
So why do you think, Namrata, why do you think there's been this kind of pushback?
I just think that we are very proud, and we all are very proud, and we're very, very sentimental about our artisans and about our crafts. And the intent is just very sincere and warm and fuzzy. All of us would like to see the artisans to be in a better place financially. Sabyasachi is not the answer to that. Dastkari Haat Samiti alone is not the answer to that. Creative dignity alone is not the answer to that. The government is not the answer to that. It requires a massive overhaul and a multi-pronged approach to alleviate most of the, I don't know, it's 45 lakh registered and maybe 60 to 70 lakh, disorganized, other than the 45 lakh unregistered artisans, to sort of lift them from the chronic poverty cycle that they live in. They literally live hand to mouth when they don't have work, and even when they do have work,
So you think Sabyasachi is being singled out? Would that be
100%?
Yeah.
100%.
Let me.
And I would also, I'm sorry. I also want to say that mass manufacture. He's not the first one to mass manufacture. He's only sort of created a capsule collection, which may be 5,000 pieces, 10,000 pieces, 20,000 pieces for each and every. There are
I want to bring in
variety
Meera now. Hang on, Namrata. I'll come back to you. I want to bring in Meera, who has been one of the mobilizers of an open letter to Sabyasachi that Sabyasachi did then respond to. Now I went through that, and he seemed to make 2 points. One, that the mass line is different from the luxury line, and two, that all that he wanted to do was to take design and put it on the global map. There's been another counter to that, and the counter to that is that Indian crafts were always on the global map. If you were to very simply, Meera, tell an audience that is not embedded in the fashion and design world of India, what's at stake here? Jaya Jaitly explained some of it, and you heard Namrata's counters. So I'd be interested in now hearing you. Go ahead, Meera. You're muted at your end. You just need to unmute yourself and go ahead.
So first of all, I just wanted to say that the idea was never to gang up on Sabyasachi. And it was not a bunch of NGOs, really. There were 5 artisan associations who were signatories of that letter. And in fact, that's why I even suggested that get an artisan for the show, but maybe another time. I think for us, it's not really about Sabyasachi, as I even wrote to Namrata. I think it's about the signal this gives out when one is talking of a global opportunity, of when we say putting Indian design on the map. And when it comes from an icon like Sabyasachi, who's always stood for Indian design, we actually wanted to take this case and make it a talking point to dive deeper into the issues that have always sidelined Indian artisans. So this is really not about Sabyasachi, and he followed a thought process which we can all respect. That's his thought process. All we are saying is, let's look at the implications of what this means, what this opens up, what's the signal it gives to other global brands, to other designers, especially at a time when we are digitizing like crazy. After COVID.
So is at the heart of it the fact that somebody's individualism has been digitized for mass production? Please, at all stages, correct me if I'm wrong, because this is not my area of expertise. So I'm trying to understand this and also simplify it for my audience the best way I can. So is it that, Meera, that it is a little bit like me sort of painting something, then that being picked up, being taken into design, and then being mass produced without me getting, here me as the artisan, me getting any of either the credit or a significant share of the profit? Would that be what this is really about, Meera?
I think partly yes, Barkha. It opens up this debate of how complex, when we talk of artisan supply chains being linked to global supply chains. And increasingly the world over, people are looking at the handmade industry as a very significant, as a very significant market segment in reviving and leading sustainable economies of the future. So when one is talking of that, one understands that in a community, the way IPR has operated, it's very complex because you can't pin it down to one person who's created a design. It's been the work of generations of innovators who've done
Okay.
so.
Okay, let me bring in.
And when you have two creative professionals, in this case, Sabyasachi, and the creative, the professionals, the artisans in this case, how do we actually navigate this question of IPR? I mean, to just flip the whole argument, if someone had made designs inspired by Sabyasachi's designs and inked a mega deal the way he did with H&M, would it not have been an issue for Sabyasachi?
It's an interesting question, and I want to take it to Gaurav. Gaurav Jai Gupta, renowned designer himself, and I think Gaurav, what we're hearing from Meera and Jaya is that this is not only about Sabyasachi. This is a moral question that presents itself for all of you. How do you see this debate?
So, I mean, definitely it's not about Sabyasachi. I've been following it up. One of the things which I definitely would like to put through is that there's a book by Rosemary Krill, on chintz. And one of the motives which has been used is exactly the same. It's almost as if it's lifted. I mean, I obviously don't know about the copyrights in this, but to my belief or assumption, it's an open source motive. So it's almost like, the way we have it in graphics. So using it, but what it comes across is that it's been designed by Sabyasachi Art Foundation, which not really is the case. So a brand like Sabyasachi, which has so much resources, to their disposal, what I would have loved is that they would have come up with their own, vocabulary. I mean, he already has one, but still in terms of motives, and I think that is one particular area where I think it's very clear. Right? I mean, you can get the book and you can see it for yourself. It's on the cover, so it's not that it's you can't just miss it. And second is the larger question about craft appropriation and Indian design and all that. I think it's not really I mean, I think it's a really great development for largely Indian design, though, because it opens up the doors. But I also think a brand like H&M, which is now thriving in India, was looking for a designer. I'm assuming, and I mean, there's the Sabyasachi happens to be one of the best we have, and it's an amazing collaboration. But beyond a point, I don't see any reason in terms of. I mean, I don't totally agree when it comes to the opportunity lost case, because if a project goes to a designer, it's totally up to him what he would like to do. But having said that, when it comes about digitizing, I would like to bring up another important aspect, which I think you're all missing. H&M, I'm assuming, have their own internal guidelines, like any big corporate, where they're very clear do's and don'ts, and they have a vendor base which is registered. So I think you cannot get a vendor base which is not registered to produce a collection, and it's not easy to do their audits and all that. It's a very lengthy process. So that could be one of the hindrances, I think. And second is, I know that they have a sustainable goal at H&M, and to my knowledge, I think they also have guidelines where they look at the impact of what kind of print is happening. So digitizing could be one of the reasons they would have done digitizing is that. But again, having said that, I would again say that there have been a lot of collaborations with H&M have done internationally. There were always ways where you could have brought in the clusters in to the premises and done it. But again, it's a designer's choice, and you can't really blame him for not doing it.
But am I hearing you say that the open source motif that has been used should have been used as an open source motif? So it's a little bit like if I get an image from Meera, as some of the images are, or from the Dastkar Haat Samiti, I can't say that we went out and filmed them. I mean, to make it a very basic example.
I would have said that they should have developed the motive and then digitized it. Because in my own practice, one of my challenges, in fact, I was having this chat with Namrata just 3 days back, is that I've been trying to get into the bridal space, but I don't want to use the existing vocabulary of motifs, which Jayaji also knows very, very well. And it's very, very challenging in a country like India, where we live in our history as a collective, to come up with something new which speaks to the consumer. So commercially, and I would say from a commercial point of view, I'm a smaller brand. I don't have resources where I can get services, I can avail services of printmakers and all the other things, wherein a brand like Sabyasachi can do that very, very easily. So
Yeah.
something like this, does that make me stupid, or does that
Yeah.
make someone like him smart? Because
Yeah.
it makes us, wonder, like, are we really wasting our time, or should we also take that shortcut?
Very interesting. And before I go back to Jaya Jaitly, I'd like Namrata to come in because, clearly Gaurav is not speaking as an NGO activist. This is not him ganging up, as it were, against Sabyasachi. He's raising some, I think, important, creative, ethical questions. And, I'm personally so sick to death of hearing everybody bandy about the phrase sustainable fashion, recycling, upcycling, because you hear so much of it and it seems like just an Insta slogan. Because when it comes to really the real test, Namrata, the real test would lie, sustainability's real test would lie in attribution, credit, revenue share, that kind of creative democracy, for lack of a better word. Namrata?
I absolutely agree with you, but I also think that sustainability means different things in different countries and different economies. For us, our economic livelihood dependence on our dependence on the artisans is far more important than, I would say, environmental sustainability. And for example, I've written a long piece on leather. The whole world is going anti-leather, but God forbid if this were to happen to India, there's a livelihood element to it, there's a caste element to it, there's a price element to it. But to answer your question, I did actually look up the Rosemary Krill cover, Fabric of India. I in fact have the book at home, and it's very similar to Sabyasachi's, but it's not the same. Hers, in fact, has birds on it. But the argument was first fast fashion, right? The argument that the open letter was not just the Sanganer print, it was, has he let the artisan down by tying up with a fast fashion brand? So in that, Gaurav is absolutely right, because H&M is actually one of the most ethical companies in the world. I mean, there are fast fashion brands and there are ethical fast fashion brands, which is H&M. So despite their volume, they have been pioneers in promoting conscious cotton, in fair trade, in their transparency index. They were number one in last year, and they've been in the top 5 for several years before that. So they are very, very strict about who they work with, and right down to the supply chain, they're very, very strict about that. Secondly, the Sanganer print, it's a motif like the Taj Mahal, like the Bengal tiger, like the paisley, which Etro, I'm sure you know this very famous Italian company called Etro that has digitized the Jamivar shawl for decades and made gazillions out of it. They don't even credit India, leave alone that it's a Jamivar shawl.
Yeah.
So, it's...
But is that fair? I mean, there are all kinds of questions about cultural appropriation
I don't know.
there, right?
Yes, but these are open source things. So, I don't think you can say the paisley, is Indian completely, because did it come to us from the Uzbeks? Did it come to us from the Mongols? We don't really know, right? So that whole Southeast Asian, the whole Silk Route has bastardized so many fashions, mixed up so many silhouettes, given us the pajama, which, we wear as a salwar, and we may think it's Indian, we may think it's not. The sari we love as the Indian garment, but it's so similar to the Greek drape, and it has come from a Greek princess. So, historically, these are wonderful things to have conversations about, to dig, to debate, to have a counterpoint of view. My problem is the pillaring of one designer and the manner in which it's done.
Okay, let me bring in Jaya and Meera now. Hang on. Jaya Jaitly, go ahead. Jaya Jaitly, yeah.
Well, actually, I am completely against patenting and copyright. And in that, I'll agree with Namrata. Once the person who was the head of the GATT signature agreement, which brought in the WTO and a whole different globalized scene, he came and he said, oh, this Indian paisley on my tie, it's so beautiful. It's the Indian paisley, you should patent it. And I wrote a whole article in the Economic Times about how or how can you patent something that's traveled centuries and countries and different hands, and each karigar makes the paisley differently. So that is one issue. I'm not talking so much about a design as I'm talking about the owners and the protectors of that particular cultural heritage and skill. And how can you not be inclusive if those people are still living and working and can produce beautiful things? If they were all dead and gone and you want to pick up a museum book from V&A and copy anything you like and attribute it to India, fine. And if you don't, well, too bad. You're obviously too mean to do that. But but the fact is that I have worked with artisans all my life, so has Meera, and we can bring out the most fantastic things from the artisan's hand. Gaurav works with handloom weavers. He's learnt his work from them. So they still are alive and kicking, and they would love to collaborate with the Sabyasachi, sit in his studio, evolve designs with him from any book that Sabyasachi wants, and then he can say that I worked with the Sanganer artisan, so-and-so, 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 and then we digitize the designs. Give some credit to human beings who are existing and who are really suffering. And I do not agree with Namrata that they're among the richest community. I will share with you the WhatsApp message I got from Santosh Dhanopia, who's one of the better people in over there. It's so miserable the way that they're suffering now. I've been to Sanganer and been from home to home. हाँ मैडम ये तो सब अभी screen print हो गया. The whole place is like a garbage heap, as I've written, and it's very unfair to think that they're all fantastic and therefore we are doing them a favor by.
Okay,
they are
let me get Gaurav. Let me get Gaurav because Gaurav to jump in at this point. Gaurav, as a designer, how do you reconcile the need to make a successful business, but also keep the dignity and the rights of the workers at the bottom of that hierarchy, who are really the spine, as it were, of a designer's work?
See, it's a very individual take. I think it's an entire belief system, and I think here, I mean, for my own self, I have walked the talk for a very long time, and I think to each their own, because at the end of the day, there is no denying the fact that Sabyasachi is the biggest name. There is a lot all of us can learn from him. But to me, it's about how do you really measure success, and is economics the only criteria? And also, I think it's a very ethical question where it's more about morality. It's about it really about what you believe in personally. So and it's a very complex system in India between artisans and designers, because I'm a trained woven textile designer. So I've operated a handloom. I went to England and I studied, for 3 years. And my narrative is totally different. And, I don't use aggressive marketing and PR mechanisms to shout out loud, but that's the only way. But if I'm happy in my space, a lot of people might say, oh, is the label shut? What are you doing? So we're not really questioning.
If you were having this conversation with Sabyasachi over a cup of coffee, Gaurav, what would you say to him?
I would say the same thing. Why didn't you create a new motive? Because I know what a struggle it is. Ask a printmaker who's sitting in Jaipur. I had this conversation with her, and she was one of the first ones to put it up, actually. And I've been talking to her for last 3 years that, as a label, we don't want to use the existing vocabulary. We want to develop what is so special about a designer then? What am I adding? So I asked, and I'm speaking from a textile designer point of view. There's a huge difference between textiles and fashion. So the language of textile, your motive and your pattern becomes a key ingredient. So ask this question to a girl whose entire day-to-day earnings are based on patterns. They're printmakers. They sit down and they sketch motives and they observe from daily life. And also one of the questions which I want to ask the entire design fraternity, when will we move forward as a country in terms of our design language and vocabulary? Why everything in India is about the past? Nobody is looking at the future. You have these archives, you have a rich heritage, okay, we know. And, right from the LVs and all this royalty, they've all commissioned brands like Van Cleef, Harper's. It's a known done to death. I'm sick of it, please. I mean, you're sitting there, and with all due respect,
Yeah.
I'm not really
I mean,
calling them
the assembly line nature of our visual language, I think,
it's boring.
it's not just boring, it's also so inauthentic. It's completely cookie cutter.
Exactly. So,
But that is a completely different debate. I mean, social media has flattened us all into sort of replicas of each other, and there is a kind of creative boredom, at least as someone who would love for clothes to reflect my individualism. I keep looking for that and I don't find it. Meera, let's come back to what bothers you and what you think of Sabyasachi's answer to some of the concerns that have been raised by people like yourselves, Jaya, Jaitly, Laila Tayebji, and now Gaurav, in some ways reinforcing much of your argument. Go ahead, Meera.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel that when one is talking of H&M as being a sustainable brand, which could have led the way for artisanal production to become part of the global supply chain, if we are talking of sustainability, then artisans use the least energy to produce. I mean, we need to invest in this sector. I mean, the reason why people don't find it easy to work with the supply chain is because not enough investment is done, despite its many advantages, that it gives employment, it's so low energy, it almost has zero waste. It has this innovation. It's not a static thing. Artisans themselves are creative professionals on par with designers and artists. I mean, there's so much potential out there. And I think it's just that disappointment that if Sabyasachi could have pushed the Indian sari with H&M, he could have pushed part of the collection. If it was difficult for them to make the entire production, and I understand there are a lot of supply chain issues, at least a part of it could have been pushed as an investment, as a trial, as a signal to the world.
Okay.
And I think that's the disappointment. And again, this is not about Sabyasachi. I want to use this opportunity to deep dive into so many issues, because there are also instances of artisans copying designer motives, instances of artisans copying artisans. I mean, power looms copying handlooms. See, the issues are really grave. And I think we all need to deep dive into it without making it personal. And Barkha, I'd be great if you I'd be really happy if you open a series of discussions, bring different experts, deep dive into this.
And the next time I really would want to hear, and I think that point is taken from you, from the artisans themselves. So I think whenever we do gather again to talk about this, it would be interesting to see.
I'd just like to say one thing, since this is about Sabyasachi also. I'm just going to quote a little bit from an interview that he gave to Border and Fall, where he says that you need to repay the people who make you successful. If you don't do that, it's like cutting the tree that you are sitting on. So I'm quoting Sabyasachi.
Okay, fair enough. Namrata, I do have to take last comments from you and Jaya Jaitly. Now, Jaya, I'll give you the last word. Namrata, go ahead, respond to everything you've heard so far. There's disquiet even coming from Gaurav, so you can't really present this as sort of the NGOs versus Sabyasachi. Namrata, you're on mute.
Can I
go ahead. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just don't think this is an artisans versus Sabyasachi debate, simply because he's the biggest and the most commercially successful Indian designer making Indian clothes. He himself employs 1,600 artisans. And the reason why I know this number is because I asked him for an interview recently. He outsources to 7,500 artisans outside his company very regularly. So his commitment to craft is his commitment to craft, and I don't think anybody is a moral gatekeeper to ask any other designer about checks and balances, right? If it is not about Sabyasachi, then the open letter, I think, should not have existed at a time where he had the only major international collaboration an Indian designer has had. Secondly, I want to say that, when we talk about mass manufacture, Ritu Kumar has been doing it for decades with her label and her RK, and she does a fantastic job of it. She sells, commercial clothes for very, very little money. Anita Dongre has built a few hundred crores selling clothes for as little as a few hundred rupees with her and her global Desi label. My point is, handlooms exist in a very beautiful space and they're very popular, and there's a long way for them to go, and we should all work, some of us Some of them have been working for decades to uplift the handloom worker and had a small measure of success, not a full measure of success, but they've been doing it. Fast fashion has its place for another reasons, and they both can exist in the world.
Okay, Jaya, Jaitly, last word to you. If it's not about Sabyasachi, why was this collection the context for the disquiet that has been expressed by so many of you? Jayaji.
It goes beyond Sabyasachi in what Namrata is saying, because she's saying something like handlooms have a long way to go. The sad part was when Sabyasachi and his great-grandfathers or nobody was around, handlooms were ruling the world. And the sad thing is that it's the situations all over the world, colonialism and even fashion and mechanization, that has pushed the handloom weaver right down to the bottom of the ladder. And it's very condescending to say, oh, he has a long way to go. You had your foot on his head all this time. So that's one thing. Secondly, it's the question of fashion. Fashion is not doing a favor to the Indian artisan. It's the other way around. I think we have to turn our heads around and understand that. If you want to be Indian, you have to source the handicraft and handloom sector. And once you do that, you cannot deal with it as if it's just another machine. They are human beings with feelings and lifestyles and cultures and a whole history and identity behind them. The whole story of how Sanganer got there. None of that, a machine fashion design thing, that doesn't happen. This is the beauty of India and the culture and heritage of India. We can't speak the international design language along with countries that have forgotten and don't care about their old cultures. We have one. We have a civilization that is still today offering us something through the hands of these human beings. I think we really need to give them better respect.
Well, I think there can be no disagreement with what you've just said, though there could be differing opinions on the best medium for that respect. I think Namrata is arguing that that there's an economic vehicle, but I think you, Meera, and Gaurav have made the point that it's so much more complex. It is about history, it is about politics in the deeper sense, and we all know that fashion is deeply political. There is no escaping that, and I mean it in the deepest sense of politics. We will continue this conversation the next time with the voices of artisans themselves. That has been a shortcoming of this program, and I acknowledge it, and we hope to make amends for that the next time. Thank you, Meera, Jaya, Gaurav, and Namrata, for at least starting this conversation. It's one thing to pose on Instagram and talk about upcycling, sustainability, responsible fashion. It's quite another to actually make it a subaltern accounting of the voices in their own words of those who make fashion and handloom possible. And I think we do owe them that conversation without the condescension that so often creeps in by us who wear and can afford that fashion. So thank you, and we'll keep this conversation going. And to our audience, thanks for watching. Have a great weekend. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.